I come to you as a clinical psychologist. That's my training. I practiced as a clinical psychologist for a couple of decades, and also, am I not on?
You are doing absolutely good. Okay. Please just continue. Don't mind me.
For a couple of decades, and over the course of that time evolved into teaching, consulting, and doing other kinds of work. I've been in the public sector as well as run my own business. And in 2005, I moved to Washington, D.C. for a year to do some work with the federal government. 1 year led to another. I'm still there. And so in order to honor the place that I'm doing my work right now, which is what I'm going to talk with you about today, I need to let you know that I am not speaking for the U.S. government. There is nothing that I'm saying about preferences, policy, direction, or anything that reflects on the U.S. government. This is me, Cynthia Hansen, talking about how I do work in whatever place I'm working in a given year, a given week, a given day. Okay? So thank you for indulging me in that disclaimer. These are my mentors. These are the people who have brought me to this place, this journey here to South Africa. This is Steve DeShazer and Insu Kim Berg. If anyone read the book Switch by the Heaths, they were referenced in the book about bright spots and shrinking the change. I got the chance to meet them in the late 1980s after they had spent more than a decade working with a particular population of clients in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is kind of in the middle of the United States. Both of them came into the therapy profession believing that the clients most in need were the ones that the experts should be focusing on helping. And in the time of the 70s, there was a lot of theory about treatment-resistant clients, clients who could not be helped by therapy, that talking therapy could only do so much. Some people just needed to hit bottom first. Those kinds of ideas about why therapists weren't successful. These two people said, well, then we just have to figure out what to do. And what they did is they began working with the clients that kind of nobody wanted in Milwaukee who came to their clinic, and they did it as a think tank. They had people on one side of a one-way mirror observing the interactions, and then the therapist working with the client. It could be an individual, a family, a couple, and then they would learn, they would observe what worked and do it again on purpose and see what things worked once and what things might be worth doing again and again and again. And that's what built this solution-focused therapy model, one step at a time, from doing to doing it on purpose to honing it so it gets better and better. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about one particular intervention of solution-focused therapy that's one of the hallmarks of the approach. It's a solution-building approach. I'll give you a little bit of a contrast in a minute, but I want to tell you the story first. So we all know there are a lot of problems that bring people to therapy. One day, Insu saw a young mother. Okay. Just ignore him, right? Okay. One day, Insu saw a young mother who had a lot of children, was raising them on her own, wasn't able to keep a job, had not completed school, had some problems with drinking, domestic violence, partners in and out. Some of the older children had some problems with the law, the school called frequently, and she was on public assistance, and so the person who was giving her the public assistance sent her to this clinic because it had been going on a long time, all of these problems. And this woman talked with Insu, and Insu said, so, you know, what do you want to have happen? She goes, I don't know. I'm just supposed to be here. So what's important to you? Well, you know, getting my public assistance, that's important. I want to keep, so if I have to come here to get the money, then I'll come here. And they went around and around with goals. And, you know, have you ever, how did school work out for you? What happens with your children when there's trouble? What, you know, is there anything that you want, anything that your best hopes for your family, for you? She says, nothing, no, I tried that didn't work. I went to parenting classes, that didn't work. I tried to go to school, but I dropped out. I went for jobs, they didn't hire me. you know. You guys probably never have conversations like this. So Insu is very persistent because the only place to go in solution-focused therapy is understanding the client's vision for what they want. And she said, so really, ma'am, is there something, what is it, what would it take for anything at all to be a little bit better? And this woman answered, lady, it would take a miracle. So Insu said, because we all listen to our clients, right? Okay, suppose a miracle happens and these problems start getting better. And the woman's like, oh, right. No, let's just, you know, suppose a miracle happens. How would you know? The lady's like, well, a miracle, oh Lord, a miracle. Okay, a real miracle? This would be a miracle. The alarm goes off in the morning and I get out of bed. That'd be your miracle. And Insu goes, oh, you'd get out of bed right away. She said, yeah, that would be a miracle, right? We're talking about a miracle. And suppose you got out of bed right away. Then what would happen? Well, maybe I'd make breakfast for the kids so that they'd go to school with something in their stomach. So this conversation goes on with breakfast for the kids. The kids go to school. They're not hungry. They get along better. She cleans up the house so that it's nicer when they come home, you know, things like that. Miracle. And then Insu says, well, wow, this is an amazing, amazing morning. She says, so when was the last time anything like that ever happened for you? And the lady said, well, actually, it did happen a couple of weeks ago. Really? So behind the one-way mirror, they're like, oh, this is good. This is really good. And so found out that she had, for some reason, gone to bed early one night and had woken up, gotten out of bed, and cooked breakfast. And it was just a bright spot, an exception is what we call it in solution-focused therapy, a unique event that would have been overlooked in the morass of daily problems that this woman had. And so Insu and she planned to meet again, and she went on her way, and everybody took notes behind the one-way mirror. A couple of weeks later, Steve is meeting with a young man, and the conversation's going in circles again because this young man had been addicted to heroin for many, many, many years. And so Steve was asking him, so what do you want? I want to get high, you know, got some money. You know, what might be a little bit better? What can we do here that would help you out? I don't know, I just have to come here, you know. Not much going on in that conversation, so Steve goes, well, okay, this worked a couple weeks ago for Insu. Let me ask you a weird question. Suppose a miracle happened and this drug problem that you have is gone just like that. How would you know? And the guy said, well, right, like that's never gonna happen. Steve goes, yep, it's a miracle. And the guy looked at Steve. Steve looked at the guy. The guy goes, well, you know, if it's a real miracle, this would be your miracle. I take my works, or whatever he said, I can't speak Milwaukee, and I'm getting ready to get high, getting ready to shoot up. I get my vein tied off, I'm all ready to go, and I put the needle down and walk away. There's your miracle. Steve goes, whoa. Well, that's a miracle. That's a miracle. They talk a little bit more about that, you know, where we would go, what would happen. And so Steve goes, well, this worked for Insu a couple weeks ago. Suppose, I mean, when was the last time a little bit of this happened? And the guy said, well, you know, funny you should say that. A couple of days ago, I was getting ready to building started because these conversations that were going around in problem territory that was so extensive popped out of problem territory into solution building with this miracle question that a client gave INSU. You guys may have heard those kinds of conversations before. They're not uncommon. And this was in the therapy world. So I'm going to put up, you guys are all used to this old woman, young woman thing? Okay, the both and. So I'm just going to use this as a frame. There's problem solving and solution building. That's a little simplistic, but we're going to be simple for a minute. And they have different outlines for the same images. So the young woman looking away with a feather, and the old woman looking down in the fur with a big nose, all right? So those coexist, and we don't argue about them. However, in solution-focused therapy, we take a different approach. I'm going to compare it with problem solving because problem solving is more of a mainstream way of thinking. A problem solving type of organizing questions for an interview would be, what is the client organization's problem? What does the consultant think the client organization should do to solve the client organization's problem? And then what does the consultant need to do to motivate the client or organization to do what the consultant thinks the client organization should do about the client organization's problem? Okay, right? So we're always looking at motivation and explaining things in ways that make sense, that solve the problem and move the client forward. Solution building. Different emphasis. What does the client organization want? So we're like taxi drivers. We don't move till we find out what the client wants. We just don't go. Where do you want to go? If you don't know, we don't move. Second, what can the client do about what the client organization wants? What's already there that we can work with? And it's always about what they want, not just what's there in general. And then what needs to happen for the client or organization to do what the client organization can do about what the client organization wants. Now, when I say that I started as a therapist, and INSU and Steve are my mentors, they also sent me to Washington with great hopes and their blessing to see what happens when I go into a large federal bureaucracy with these as my organizing questions, because they're in my soul. And these are a couple of examples of what happens. Oh, I forgot the central philosophy. It's very simple. If it works, don't fix it. So what that means, oftentimes for therapists, for consultants, is that we get called in, people have gotten together and decided they need our help. And when they decide that, they've also taken action on some other things simultaneously. So right away, if it works, don't fix it, they may have started solving a problem along with bringing us in for help that unless we ask about it, we won't know it already exists. And we could start messing around with things that are already on their way to better. If it worked once, do it again. That's the exception finding and the bright spots kind of work that we start looking for. What's already worked? When could it have been worse, but it's not? When should the problem have been there, but for some reason it was not? And when were things a little bit better, even in a different circumstance, that you could apply to the current problem? And finally, as a last resort, and really, this is only about 5 to 10% of the time, if it doesn't work, don't do it again. Do something different. So Bill mentioned that I did some work with the federal government on Hurricane Katrina. One of the things that is a concern about deploying into a disaster zone is that people come back traumatized. And we heard some references to that earlier today. There's post-traumatic growth, which leads to appreciation, gratitude, reprioritization, and enjoying the sun on your skin before you took it for granted. And that can happen, but there's also nightmares and hypervigilance and difficulties concentrating and all of those. Those all exist. So there was some concern when we deployed people down to Katrina that people would come back with more trauma than growth. And so we put together a brochure, both and, that described the problems that were possible that I didn't actually write. This part I wrote, and it's still posted on the Department of Labor website. And this is a request from the leaders who said the supervisors don't know how to engage with someone who's been down in such a terrible, horrible situation with the federal government truly blamed. And they're representatives of that, trying to do their best. So how do we make sense of this? And all of these questions have to do with what's the hardest part of the disaster work? What did you and your team accomplish that you're proudest of? What's your best memory? What else happened that's important for me to know? What suggestions do you have about improving future responses? How will you be able to apply your experiences from there to our current workplace? Is there anything I can do to help you make that application happen? How would you like to share your experiences with others on the team? And then a message about what impressed the supervisor as a result of this discussion about the work that their employee did, and asking permission to check in again in a couple of weeks. So what happened with this is it gave a template for those kinds of dialogues and those questions to bring out the solution building that might have been lost in the clear traumatic events of having gone down there and been immersed in, and it was really, for the US, a great human tragedy. And then, so that's one way. What does the client want? They want their employees to come back whole and healthy. What can the client do about what the client wants? Well, supervisors always talk to employees. And what needs to happen? Just a little protocol to provide that information as a part of the conversation. So let's see. And the other project that I worked on that I'd like to share with you in this part of the talk is a book on Native American, Alaska Native youth suicide prevention. When I started working on suicide prevention in the US, American Indian, Alaska Native populations have the highest rate of youth suicide in the country, much higher than any other part of the population. And I was asked to put together a guide, and that's been published now by the US government. And they wanted something like Native American, Alaska Native suicide prevention. Well, that's the absence of something. There's no miracle there. Is there a miracle there? There's no miracle there. There's nothing that you want to move towards. And so we found this lovely, lovely Inuit quote about to live to see the great day that dawns, that is the miracle for all of the youth. I think over again my small adventures, my fears, those small ones that seem so big for all the vital things I had to get and reach. And yet there is only one great thing, the only thing, to live to see the great day that dawns and the light that fills the world. Oh, there we've got a miracle. I can work with that. And it was given to us by the communities that wanted this guide to resonate with them, rather than a guide about all the problems that lead to the problem of suicide, the economic disparities, the cultural traumas, the daily indignities. This guide looks at what are the strengths and the knowledge in the culture that we can use, that they can use, that we can communicate to those who care about, that will lead to creating a life worth living, to see the day that dawns. So our consultants in the tribes gave us this quote: "It is time to speak your truth, create your community, and do not look outside yourself for the leader. We are the ones we've been waiting for." And that was the symbol of, it's not the experts coming in to help, it is rising up the strength and the power within the communities to find reasons for living. We also had quotes from the elders, questions from the elders from previous traumas, because there's a lot of trauma in our communities in the US that are indigenous, that the leaders ask to bring out the wisdom from the youth and the wisdom from the parents that will help honor what is it from the old traditions that you can borrow from to help with the drug problems on the reservation today? What is it from the Creator that offers you hope for the future, that gives you something to work for your community? And all of those quotes and questions is part of the guide. It's a serious guide that has been used to provide funding and hope and communication about the strengths and resources and resilience of those indigenous communities in the US. So what does the client want? To live. What does the US government want? Their citizens to be happy and healthy. What can the client do about what the client wants? We can harness the resources that already exist. And what needs to happen? Just provide a theater, a forum, a guide to put it all together in one place so that everyone can share it and learn one from the other.